curiosity, how many Jooksings are here in the room? Now, how many of you actually been to Taishan? That's pretty good. Now, what about Jooksings? Any of those? A Jooksing is a hollow piece of bamboo. I'd like to think it's a term of respect and admiration. But only wish. But then Jooksing doesn't sound too good to me either. That's that naughty little thing right there. And I'll have to let somebody else explain the significance of what that means. Anyway, that was my starter here. Usually these type of talks are referred to as finding your roots. And for the Chinese community, you can go into the Google and you'll find examples and videos of people who've gone to China finding, where they were from, their ancestors' villages and so on. I'm in the 27th generation of Lees. Although both of my parents were born in Taishan, my ancestors have been in this country for over 100 years. Father arrived here at the age of 10 back in 1921, accompanied by his aunt and uncle. My mom arrived in 1941, and I'm a native Washingtonian, having been born nearby here on North Capitol Street and growing up in the 900 block of Massachusetts Avenue. And there's a couple of people in this room that we've known since they were kids. So our roots go back quite a ways. On my mom's side, according to the immigration files, my mother's father was born in Seattle, Washington in 1887. I take that with a little grain of salt. I've chased every jurisdiction in Washington State trying to find a birth certificate, and they say Washington State was a hick state at the time. They didn't have any very poor record keeping. Most people were born at home, and very few people got registered. So that birth is a little bit debatable. When he came back into the country in 1912, what got him in was a school teacher went down, had a picture of a class, and said, "This little boy here is this man." And then there was a guy in the local government that said, "I didn't know the kid, but I've known the father forever, and he's been talking about him for 20 plus years." So that's how he got back in. My mom married my, grandfather, according to government records I've got my hands on, he did live in various places in Pennsylvania and ended up in the Pittsburgh area. Mom married my father in the mid-1930s and came in 41. On the Lee side of the family, the archive says that I've got a great-great-grandfather that was arrived here in 1862. Again, that's kind of debatable because it doesn't match what I know of the family genealogy. Later on, there was a lot of Lees in the Washington area. So, I've got some stuff with me. I didn't bring it. We do have a tree that goes back about 1,000 years. So, moving on here, as I see. Where am I? Okay. Up through the 70s, I think, and partially into the 80s, you could say that Taishan was the ancestral home for about 70–80% of the overseas Chinese. That's an old term that used to refer to people like us. And you could go to Europe, you could go to Australia, you could go to Vietnam, almost any place, and they came from Taishan. Taishan is a county in Guangdong province. That's that province that's closest to Hong Kong and Macau. Now, every 3 years, the Lee Association, of which we have a branch here in the Washington area, goes back to Taishan for a meeting. And that's where I met, because of that, that's how I met Helen and Rita. Some of the relatives have been saying for a number of years if I went on this trip, they make sure I got taken around, shown it, got into the house, and so forth. Otherwise, I wouldn't have understood a word of it. And I kid you not. There's a little ambiguity when you say Taishan. Taishan is actually that red area there. Where the dot is in the red area is, in the local dialect, is Huisiang, and I'll explain that in a minute. I flew by myself into what used to be called Canton, now Guangzhou. Some of the people that travel on these things use it as an opportunity to do some sightseeing around the rest of China, or go down to Hong Kong either before or after. I didn't do that. I just flew directly into Canton, and I was there by myself for about a day, but I'd been there a couple of times already, so I was very comfortable making arrangements with the Landmark Hotel Canton. And then I spent a day wandering around. I went and saw a memorial to Sun Yat-sen. I saw the Qin family compound, and I saw this huge Canton Tower that towers over everything. You can see Hong Kong in the lower right, Macau in the bottom center, Taishan to the left, and Guangzhou up to the top there. Also, this particular Lee Association meeting, for some reason they split it up this time. Jooksings, which is the Mandarin term for Sun Yat-sen, we started there, and then second half of the convention went down to the Taishan. I'm going to be drifting back and forth on these names because, there's the names that I grew up with, there's the names that were more common, and then there's what's currently used. Guangdong Province also used to be called Canton. Guangzhou is the name of the capital of the province. In Huishanhua, it's called Gongju, pronounced with an H. The counties in the province, they're grouped into prefectures, and Jiangmen, however that's pronounced, is the prefecture. I keep getting ahead of myself. The county, Taishan is actually a county, but you can also say it's the city, and the terms are kind of ambiguous. If you Google it, you'll say it's a city-county. So, I don't know. Taishan is from what I've seen, it's a Mandarin way of saying it. Taishan is the Cantonese way of saying it, and Huishan with an H is the way the locals say it. Take it with a grain of salt. If you're looking in the immigration records, the ship arrival documents, you'll see that Suning or Suning is spelled with an S in many of the documents. And then the city is Huisiang, and I'll get into that a little bit more. Again, let's see, the red-orange area is the county, and what we speak is sometimes referred to as Fei Yip or Four County. It's also referred to as Taishanese or Huisiang or Huisianghua. If you Google Taishan on Google Maps, you'll get this image here, but this is only a part of the county. This is where the city is on the north side or the right side of the river. And when I came in, my previous trip, I came in on a bus from Canton and came in along this upper portion, and I'll show you a little more of that. And then, but here it looks like it's, last 10, 20, 30 years is this here. And then below the river is some villages that I'll get into in a little more detail as we go through this thing. Down here, if any of you have relatives that came from something called Fei Yu 49, that's that area that's developed over on the right. My brother-in-law left there when he was 13. He has no idea where to find this village. I'm not knocking him, I'm just saying, you know, he grew up as a kid, he left it, you know, left at an early age. Later on, here's another one of the county. Later on, let me see, Taishan is up in here. Rita's going to talk about the village right down in here. And then Macau is, I think Macau's over on the far right bottom. This is another scene from downtown. This is the original city area, and everything else used to be rural. Back in 2007, most of this stuff down below here was just very rural. Here's a couple shots. I'm going to go through these real quick. That's the main bus station. There's a local bus station that I arrived in by bus from Canton. On the right, we couldn't find a cab, so we caught a city bus and found our way to a hotel. Let's see. These couple of shots here, just going to show you a little bit of the city going in. Let's see if it comes up. These are just kind of 3 short videos. If they come up, please. As you look down the side street, you'll see there's actually some pretty big buildings in there. That's all I was trying to show. It's typical of a lot of Oriental countries. You'll see stores on the bottom level. We're not going to have too many videos. The videos here I'm showing are taken back in either in 2007 or 2008. What you'll see is a mixture of 2007 pictures, some pictures I borrowed from a relative, and stuff more recently. In the 2007 trip, I stayed at this hotel you see on the left, and then on the right, we had a meal. You don't go to dim sum in China. You go to nim cha, which means drink tea, and you eat cha no, which is tea and food. In recent years here, all I hear is dim sum, but when I went back to Hong Kong, they did use the nim cha as the term. You're going to have to bear through. I'm going to be showing you some pictures. I'm going to be using this for some relatives, so that's why some of these slides are going to be repeats. This slide here, my aunt's older sister lived on the 2nd floor of this building, and there's a paint store down on the bottom. But you can kind of see a little architecture. And as we go through this thing, you'll see that there's modern buildings and new buildings. Back in the 1934, part of the family went back there, and I believe they were in this end building. In 2007, 3 of the buildings were linked together as a video arcade, and now it's just a convenience store on the bottom. You know, that was a 3-story. You can see the 3-story buildings are 3 stories. I have a debate every couple of months about whether it was a 2-story building she lived in or a 2. This is a lake behind there. When my aunt, who's a Phi Beta Kappa PhD, Professor Emeritus, went there, she talked to the local folks. They couldn't find her house, partially because they changed the name of the street. Her memory as a 13-year-old versus now. They tried telling her maybe it was in the rice paddy behind here that's now a lake. This is along that same street coming back toward my hotel. These just give you some views. And coming back in this direction, about 2 blocks from the first shop, there's an arcade right there. And I went in there, and at the jewelry counter, I couldn't talk to the girls in there because they spoke Mandarin. You're getting a lot of people there that have immigrated from other parts of China. Of course, you recognize the building in the middle. You recognize the building here. There's 3, 4, however many McDonald's there. You may have heard Chinese saying, there's a famous proverb that illustrates the fame of Guangdong food: live in Hongjiao, marry in Suzhou, dine in Guangzhou, and die in Luzhou. Has to do with Hongjiao is a very pretty place. The women in Suzhou are very nice in their language, and it's a very pleasant experience. The best food is in Guangdong province and Hong Kong. But if you're, and then the best wood is in that last place. That's one of my cousins sitting there. Seriously, and the food here and in Hong Kong is very similar, I find, to what you find in the Cantonese restaurants here in the local area. Yeah. But on one of my trips in Shanghai, I just had to get away from the folks and experiment and check out, make a scientific comparison of Chinese McDonald's and U.S. McDonald's. Here's a couple more street scenes. In the bottom right, there's a building named Bell on it, and one of my cousins was born right above the B. So it's another reason I had to include some of these slides. Here's a pedestrian street. If you look up any pictures of Taishan, you'll see this picture, or something very similar. Here's one of the relatives buying some nuts from this lady. Small vehicle here. This was, at the end of that street, there was a very, very, very upscale shopping mall, and this looked like a jewelry store being dedicated. We just happened to be strolling by this spot, and that looks like a M up at the top.